The consequences of hoarding wealth, the tale of Hamid. In a small, peaceful village nestled at the foot of towering mountains, there lived a man named Hamid. He was known far and wide for his immense wealth. Blessed with abundant lands, livestock, and gold, Hamid was regarded as one of the richest men in the region. However, despite his blessings, Hamid's heart was closed to the needs of others. The wealth given to him by God was his greatest treasure, but also his greatest test, though he didn't know it yet. In his early years, Hamid worked hard, toiling from dawn to dusk. His efforts bore fruit as he expanded his lands and multiplied his fortune. His once modest home grew into a grand estate, his livestock flourished, and his coffers overflowed with gold. However, as his wealth grew, so did his pride, and soon, he began to believe that everything he possessed was a result of his own efforts alone. The village he lived in was simple and humble. The people were not as wealthy as Hamid but lived with contentment. Some of the villagers struggled to make ends meet, working hard to feed their families. It wasn't uncommon for them to knock on Hamid's door, seeking help. Mothers came pleading for food for their hungry children, travelers asked for shelter, and neighbors came in times of need. But Hamid's response was always the same: he refused. "I worked hard for this wealth," he would say, turning them away. "God helps those who help themselves." Hamid's attitude began to weigh on the village. The elders warned him, "Wealth is a gift from God, meant to be shared with those in need. Your abundance could ease many lives, and God tests us by what He gives." But Hamid scoffed at their words. If God wanted them to have wealth, He would have given it to them. "What I have is mine alone." Years passed, and Hamid's fortune only grew. But so did the needs of the village. There were droughts, and crops failed. Children went hungry, and homes crumbled under the weight of hardship. Still, Hamid's doors remained closed. He watched as his neighbors grew weaker, but he felt no sense of responsibility. The poor, he thought, were simply unlucky. One particularly harsh winter, an old beggar knocked on Hamid's door. He was frail, his clothes tattered, and his hands trembling from the cold. "Please, sir," he begged. "I haven't eaten in days. I only ask for a little food to keep me alive." Hamid, annoyed by the interruption, sneered. "I owe you nothing, old man. What I have is mine because I earned it. Go and fend for yourself." The old man looked up with tearful eyes and whispered, "Wealth is a trust from God. Those who hoard it and refuse to share will one day face its consequences." Hamid, unmoved, shut the door in his face. The winter passed, but something strange began to happen in Hamid's life. Though his wealth had been a source of pride and joy, it began to feel like a burden. His fields, once abundant, began to wither. His livestock, once healthy and strong, fell sick. Even his grand estate began to fall into disrepair. His servants, fearing the strange misfortune that had befallen Hamid, began to leave one by one. Despite all his efforts, Hamid could not stop the slow decay of his fortune. The gold in his coffers seemed to slip through his fingers as unexpected expenses mounted. He hired workers to repair his fields, but they failed. He bought new livestock, but they too fell sick. His wealth, once his greatest pride, now became a source of anxiety and dread. In his despair, Hamid sought the advice of a wise scholar who lived in a distant town. The scholar, known for his wisdom and deep understanding of life's trials, listened carefully to Hamid's plight. "You have been given a great blessing by God," the scholar said, "but you mistook it for something earned by your own hands. Wealth is a test, not a reward. It is meant to be shared, for God provides through one person to help another. Hamid, still not fully convinced, asked, "But why has my wealth crumbled now? I did nothing different." "You did everything different," the scholar replied. "You ignored the pleas of the hungry, you turned away the needy, and you hoarded what was meant to be shared. Your wealth was never yours to keep, it was a trust. Now, God has taken it back because you failed the test of generosity." The scholar's words struck Hamid like lightning. He had always thought of his wealth as something permanent, something he could control. But now he realized that wealth was fleeting, and its true purpose was not to glorify oneself but to serve others. As Hamid returned to his village, he saw it with new eyes. The poverty he had ignored was now glaring. The faces of the people he had turned away haunted him. The beggar's words echoed in his mind, "Wealth is a trust from God." Hamid knew what he had to do. With the little wealth he had left, he opened his doors to the village. He shared food with the hungry, repaired homes for those in need, and provided for the orphans and widows. He no longer saw his fortune as something to hoard but as a tool to bring relief to others. The transformation was slow, but over time, Hamid's heart softened. He no longer cared about the riches he had once been obsessed with. Instead, he found joy in giving, in seeing the smiles of the children he fed, and hearing the gratitude of the families he helped. Though he was no longer the wealthiest man in the region, he had gained something far greater: peace of heart and soul. And then, something miraculous happened. As Hamid gave, his wealth began to return, not in the form of gold or grand estates, but in blessings from the people he had helped. His fields flourished again, not because of his efforts, but because of the prayers of those he had once neglected. His livestock grew strong, not through his management, but through the grace of God. In the end, Hamid learned that wealth is not measured by gold or possessions but by the good one does with it. He had once been a prisoner of his own fortune, but by sharing what God had given him, he found true freedom. Moral of the story: the tale of Hamid reminds us that wealth is not an end in itself but a means to serve others. When we hoard what God has entrusted to us, we risk losing not just material wealth but the blessings that come with it. True wealth lies in giving, and the greatest riches are found in the joy of helping those in need.